Now, for 17 years, Manchester United, fans all over the world, has been crying out to get the Glazers out of the club. This is the final crescendo, what's playing out right in front of our eyes, as the British crown jewel of English football is on the verge to being sold. We've been saying green and gold until we sold, and the moment is playing right in front of our eyes, and there's nothing we can do about that because we don't have any say or control who the new owners is. But what is evidently enough is that we are finally seeing the end of the Glazer area. It's like Manchester United has been trying for the past 10 years at least, trying to run forward to win things by being pushed back. You know, it's like trying to run and somebody's kind of tied a rope against your waist and pulling you back, only focusing on business instead of football. Manchester United PLC was listed on New York Stock Exchange as a business. If you read the description, it did never mention a football club. It's a business entity. Now, what's been transpired now is what we're gonna look in all the facts and details, debunking the timeline as we are entering the final race. It's quite interesting because you might even call it an F1 Formula 1 race where you have pole positions, as what some media outlets are reporting. This is the final crescendo of a potential sale of Manchester United, something that we've been crying out for years. And some media outlets are even rattled and scared and driving a xenophobic or Islamophobic agenda. We're going to also look into that. But what really matters is, at the end of the day, that any bid that comes in for Manchester United at this point of stage is better than the 17 years sheer madness and the robbery that we had by the Glazers.
Hello everyone, this is my first ever hosting space. Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, you're totally fine coming through, okay, mate? Hopefully I'm okay too.
Fantastic. Just for the information, like, you know, this is going to be a recorded space because at the end of the day, we are a global fan base, and, you know, the information we share here is pretty much, you know, global opinions as we come to the end of the crescendo of the bidding process. And of course, there's been a lot of confusion within the, you know, what media is reporting. And, you know, personally, I feel like, you know, yeah, it's time to make the popcorn and just watch it sort of transpire. But there's certain things that we sort of have to sort of debunk where we stand today in terms of the sales and bidding process. And according to my experience, this usually takes 7 months in the making. So the share expectations that's been set is pretty much set by the media, according to my opinion, and also fans, because I understand, like, we want everything delivered now, give me every second, every minute. As soon as you come home for work, we're looking for information. So according to me, what transpired yesterday was never to be set like as a proper deadline, but in a certain way, it was to sort of, you know, what Sky was reported and Carbon and everything was a little bit of a confusing. I don't know if everyone can concur, but it's actually been confirmed, and, you know, they asked for an extension. And why did they do so? In certain sense, what can be tactical in a way, you know, but it can also be logistic in a way that there's a lot of paperwork involved to prepare. You also don't want to miss, you know, if you have one shot, an opportunity to improve your bid. It could be many reasons, but it can also be a tactical reason to smoke out the other shadow silent bidders that's in the process, because it is, as we know, and not a public listed sale. This is run by the Rainy Group with a tight ship. Some people get information from the club itself, but at the end of the day, you know, if you signed an NDA and if you appoint Rainy Group, they are the ones that are running the process and not really disclosing what is the bidding figure. All we know is that they set a price of 6 billion as the asking price. So Paul, do you want to sort of continue talking away? Because what I want to do is to focus so far about, you know, is it a game that, you know, it's being played out to sort of optimal money? Is it more of a, you know, to smoke out who the bidders are? Because we recently find out Elliott Group is in there to offer finance to finance the bidders. They're not the minority stakeholder, right? So what I want us to do as a global fan base is to look at the good, bad, and the ugly, because at the end of the day, we need to sort of look at the future of Manchester United in terms of the ownership. Now, my personal stance is that any bidder that comes in and take the helms away from the Glazers, that is what matters, because it's been 17 years we've been crying out for this opportunity. But what we don't want is what we're hearing in the media right now, is that the Glazers are looking for a dance partner. Now, is that a fear? And all I can say is, take a motion sickness pill and don't let the, fear and emotions clog your judgment, and just this space is about to put our logical hats together and have a discussion, a proper discussion. Paul, do you want to say something?
With the bidding process up until last night, and especially with Ineos today, the bidding process has basically been going along the lines of what you would expect the rain grid.
Okay, cool.
Let's just sit back, sort technicals out, relax. How is everyone?
Yes, exactly. Go on, Michael. Help me.
How are
My
you,
first
mate?
page. Yeah, I'm good. I'm just, as explained, it's been a crazy 24 hours with a lot of confusion, right, in terms of the media spin. And all I can thinking about is this sales process has been going on for at least 7-8 months. And I just find it remarkable that the media set some kind of deadline and expectations, but it's quite normal that you ask for an extension in this case, right? Because there's a lot of money and stake involved, right? So just look at Sky Sport was reporting 30 minutes before saying the bids has gone in, and then 30 minutes after saying bids has not gone in. So what's it going to be? So in certain ways, you look at it a tactical delay to smoke out the other hand. It's a tactical play, or it's just basically logistic paper. What's your thought process on that, Michael?
It's just the timeline, mate. As I say, we know the process. I mean, they're trying to smoke out, catch as much side information as can. Something must have spooked them a little bit for them to pull and revise a bid. They must have had some sort of information passed across to say that your bids are still too low. You're going to have to come back with a better figure.
Mick, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Paul. Welcome.
There we go. I've been talking.
There
they
we
can
go.
hear me. Right.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, the way I see it, of course, what media is reporting is the clear and obvious, that the ones that gone public, right? But it's clear and obvious that this is the crown jewel of Manchester United. So you have a lot of publicity cloud seekers. They are utilizing this PR stunt, right? So the latest that came out was this Finnish entrepreneur, Thomas, what was his name? Thomas, to offer the, I go up 3 billion, and you rest of the fan base invest in the next of 3 billion, so that is to me okay, that sounds great, fan-based ownership, half, but to raise $3 from 1 billion people and to put it in an app, that sounds a little bit too opportunistic for me.
So yeah, also that it is opportunistics. He hasn't even put an official bid; he put a letter of intent. But with the bidding process at the moment, up until last night, everything was going okay. Actually, even the start of this week, everything was going okay. The Rain Group did eventually say to both Yassim and Sir Jim about putting media reports out about what they were going to do with the club and everything like that there. The Glazers actually broke that protocol by putting out their PR spin on investments and all this other stuff, and about how they believe they can run the club and everything. So I think there's been a game played by both Yassim and Sir Jim about, especially the fact that Sir Jim now has come out and publicly said he's put a second bid in, as in he has not leaked it, he's gone out with a spokesperson. So I'm waiting now to see what Yassim does. Is he going to do the same of, we've put a second bid in for Manchester United, or is he going to take it a step further and actually say how much he's putting in? I think these guys, the system doesn't work for this type of sale. This system is designed to sell companies that are at market value by bringing it against people that would like to buy the company, be it through their own means or in consortium spaces. So when you start to play these games, this whole process gets a little bit out of whack, and basically the bidders get annoyed, which is probably what you're seeing is happening now with Sir Jim and 𝑧𝒂𝒚, especially after the massive amounts of PR that the Glazers spouted out about minority investors and all this here. Because, as we know, they've seen United's books. They've delved a deep dive into their forecasts and their sporting projects.
100%.
They know it's almost near enough impossible for an investor to come in and invest. As I say, the only way an investor comes in if he gets somebody that has enough cash to buy out the other four siblings and keep Joel and Avron together running the club. But I don't see anybody stupid enough to do that.
Yeah, but
I think it's nice.
If you actually look at the overall, I mean, you have 6 siblings, right? And 33% of the shares is owned by the Avram and Joel only, right? And in order to have an agreement in the first instance in any sales process for Rainy Group to engage, everyone needs to sign off the document, right? To give them the okay to investigate into the process. Now, we all know if you go back in timeline where they came out and say that I think they're running 2 parallel processes, basically looking for an opportunity to still stay and remain in the club. And that's the reason why you've seen the minority investors bid. And, process number 2 is the full outright sale, right? Now, we've seen that Elliott Group has come in and put in a bid, but Elliott Group, for me, according to what I heard, is only there to back up, to offer financial services for any bidder, right? Now, the way I see it panning out right now, it is what I always said is going to be a bloody, bidding war, right? That is clearly designed for that. Because as a shadow bidder, you don't know, in this instance, that you don't know what the other one is going to bid. You don't know who is in the pile, right? And I think it's more of a fear to say, I don't want to go in right now, because this might be my only last chance, right? If I go in too high, maybe the Glazers are fooling me. Maybe there's a lot of things that I think is like, a game of poker at the moment. But the signs to look after, according to my analysis, is if you see, bidders putting through to the final stage as a, exclusivity, if it's outright bidders, they are more likely to sell the whole club on 100%. But if you see them putting through minority stakeholders, that means that, I don't know, they are looking to sort of look for a dance partner. That is kind of my take on it. But if you see like a mix still, that means that they're still confused and not agreed within the family. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you're about right. And what I would add on to that as well is I think if you look at the stock price yesterday, and then once them two pulled their bids and the talk about minority investors being the only thing in, that stock price plummeted. I think that's also an indication, basically, because people seem to forget as well. You're dealing with the Glazers as in you're dealing with family members, some that will be willing to sell to you and some that won't. And a lot of these tactics that have happened in the last 24 hours are basically to show, look how much your stock price dropped with the fact that we may not bid. Now, can you imagine what's going to happen to your value of your company if you don't to go for a sale? And it's a showing to like other potential minority investors that anytime there's any PR or anything about them guys saying everything tanks, everything goes down in value, you get massive Glazer out protests on online platforms. There was not really a lot of hashtag Glazer out when the bids were looking like they're going to go in yesterday. And the second that everybody found out they didn't go in, there was just posts and hashtags. So I think it's a bit of gamesmanship going in because the brain grip system is American for American investors, and you're not dealing with American money or American investors, even though Sir Jim has an American company, but you're dealing with somebody that's a fan of the club, that wants to buy the club and is willing already to pay over market value, and you're dealing with Middle Eastern money that operates in a completely different manner. So I'm not surprised that the whole process is coming into question now, because the whole blind process doesn't work when you have two proper serious bidders. It works when you have consortiums, but not with two proper serious bidders, because they don't like the second guess. They want to know what the person has on the table and how much I need to do to match that, and if I'm willing to match that, and if I'm willing to waste my time.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you there, Paul. But let's talk about Sir Jim, because a lot of people will kind of say, no, he cannot afford it. But knowing if the Glazer wants around 6 billion, right? How do you think he's going to put his bid forward? Is it that he's most likely seeking the partnership with Elliott Group, who we know is a minority investor, right? And if that's so, that is kind of a little bit of a red flag, because we know what investment companies are like. We're talking about, the debt rolling, and what it is, to be honest, Bank of America, they own all the debts and credits of, that Glaze has been compiling for the past 17 years, that it then turns into bonds. And if you don't know what bond is, this is kind of investment, what do you call it? Investment asset that grows within interest rates. So whoever buys the Glazer PLC also needs to buy the debt and bond, right? Now, if my understanding is that Sir Jim wants to sort of take on that bond over to Ineos, and then that will also put on the shareholders. So the question is, at the end of the day, that's going to be bankrolled by JP Morgan, right? At the end of the day, you as a private investor, for some reason, you have to sort of return back that money, right? Will it just be there sitting on the company as an asset, right? I don't see that, I don't see that it being a debt-free, because at the end of the day, you got to take money out of the club sooner or later. What's your thought? Well, guys, what's your thoughts process around that?
If Michael would like to come into this, because I just got a bit of information here that is prevalent to this whole discussion that I need to read. Sorry.
Michael.
I knew this would happen.
Well, depends if he's got the money to buy the bonds up in the first place. I know that people have been buying stocks and bonds for a long time anyway. It's just, as I keep saying, as far as I know, it's going to be a scramble for the minority bits of shares, i.e. the 31%.
But either way, it's one-time payment, right? So you got to pay the Glazers out, and then you got to do a hostile takeover. You got to buy the rest of the shares as well. You got to force the hand on that one to have 100%. Now, there was numerous report coming out. I was even listening to Phil Brown today in a podcast together with Kieran Maguire, and there was kind of indications that the Glazers are looking for a dance partner, right? Which is quite scary for me, right? And this is the instant ringing bells, like, why are they then looking to put forward minority investment, and who would put that kind of money up, right? Because we already are in the minus in the books. Like, I can't put my mind into it. Why? I can't get my head around it, right? I don't see any way, because the backs are already against the walls, right? It's publicly out there that everyone has been reporting about the Glazers to sell. Now, if they somehow manage to stay in the helms, there will be more scrutiny than ever, right? Because you will have a more angry fan base that will attack all the sponsors, and sponsors will be too afraid to sponsor. That's just my take on it, right? If anyone listened to that podcast, please let me know as well, because I couldn't get heads or tails of it, because I was thinking this sounds like a little bit of Ed Woodward still running the show in the background as a consultant, because let me just remind you that the person that orchestrated that was the architect of the leverage buyout was actually Ed Woodward. So he also has a percentage in the stakes, if Manchester United gets sold. So is it a smokescreen that he actually got fired? This is just a theory, that he got fired to work on this structure, right? That is kind of the general feeling that I got after listening to that podcast. Hang on, Mark.
Yeah. One thing I will say, and it's just the information that's being thrown my way because I've asked for this information, if anybody could help me understand how our debt system works, and it's another reason why I do not, now that I do not believe in a minority investment is preventable, and I did not realize this. They have 18% to play with, the Glazers, because they have the 69%,
Yep.
even if they control all the voting shares. But the second the percentage of the company drops below 50%, and somebody's able to get the rest of that percentage, all debts are called in.
Mark, welcome to
So that means
Financial ruin. All needs to be paid.
yeah, so that means if they have a minority shareholder, say the Elliott Group, and they give the Elliott Group 20% of the company, and then somebody comes along and buys all the A shares, which is 31%, and then somebody comes along and buys Elliott out of that 21%, that means that person technically, even though they don't have voting rights, own 51% of the company, which means their debts get called.
Mark, you're
Hence why a minority investment's always weird.
Mark raised this question to speak. Mark, welcome to the show. You were listening to also to Phil Brown and Kieran Maguire. What was your take on what was your thought process after listening to this podcast that took place about 1 hour ago? Mark, are you there? Guys, on mute. Anyway.
Yeah, he's not speaking.
He's not speaking, but he's on speaker. He was requesting to speak. Anyway, so guys, I think that at the end of the day, the point is that the media don't really, have a clue, barring from yesterday, who is actually bidding. For me, it's just been a turmoil of reporting, right? The main point is to put your logic hat on and just sit back and just watch this play out, right? We know that the Glazers are the backs against the wall. We know that the finances are in dire straits, right? And for me, there's no way they can keep the club with minority investment, right? There's a lot of theories floating around, and there's a lot of people talking about silent bidders, right? And if we go back in timeline, right, to analyze everything, going all the way back to the transfer market in the summer, right? The club was already acting like they've been sold, right? We can all agree on that, right? There was no transfers until we started to spend money kind of 2 weeks out before the deadline, right? We went on spending spree. We went on and bought Anthony. We went on and bought Casemiro and all these players, right? And then January came. January, there was no spending at all. And I was kind of reporting that, yeah, Bank of America that owns all the credit, they still had 100 million to play with, but they chose not to, right? Because they reserved everything for the new owner. This was widely reported, right? So the question is, everything was silent because we saw the Glazers roaming around in Qatar, but you got to remember that you got to look at post-sale as well, right? It was the biggest stage for them to sort of expand further business view post-Manchester United as well. So of course, they formed the alliance with the Qataris, with the Saudis, with, the Emiratis from Dubai. But all along, media was reporting some form of Dubai, was still interesting, but that's been quiet, I can only speak for Dubai itself, that I know for a fact that they kind of put a bid in December, like a verbal offer bid. And that is kind of been the benchmark for the Glazers in terms of 6 billion, right? For me, that is kind of the only logical explanation, that there still is silent. And why would you, if you have a first refusal, right, the first bidder is sitting in, you just watch the other ones, doing all the heavy lifting in terms of the sports washing and all that shame and blame game. But at the end of the day, I think that this will come out in the next week or so, because this has to come out at the end of the day, right? I think that the theory here, what Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Qatar is trying to do, since they don't know who the shadow bidders is, one of the strategies is to smoke out the third bidder, like the silent bidder. Now, this is just my theory, okay? I know that Dubai is still in the race. I've been knowing this since December, at least. But where it stands today, I don't know, because I don't have direct line to Rainy. I don't have direct line to Manchester United either. But I do speak to Dubai. Guys, what's your take on the theory, or at least, do you think there is a possibility? Because I was watching Sam Peoples earlier and Ben Jacobs, and they still think it's a US. The third silent bidder is a US consortium because it's American bidding system. Paul.
Well, I still think Liberty Group can still be involved because, as I've said before, they have they get invited into stage 2 anyway because of their pre-agreement they had with Green Group over the Chelsea sale. Glazers would have agreed to that terms in a way. You know, they're not going to discount having a third bidder in into the next stage because, yeah, again, it creates more bidding power, more people bidding, better money comes out of it. The first refusal offer, I've heard the exact same thing, that there is a first refusal, but I haven't heard the terms of the first refusal, as in they were verbal. But does that first refusal come in when anybody makes a bid, or does that first refusal come in when there's a deal on the table? Because we don't know, we don't know if they're showing their hand or not.
It's like it's like when you play tennis, you have a seeding system, in layman's term, right? Some people play the satellites to get to where they are, while the seeded player, comes in where it's like, the let's say 8 matches to play, right? Does that make sense, right? So as first refusal, you will sit there because you have the exclusivity. You were the first one to bid. You said, like, okay, here's 6 billion, right? Just give you an example. Here's 6 billion. Let me know. Okay, we will go out still and conduct a tender process, right? Fine, cool. But you got to let me know at the end of the process who is willing to bid, and then inform me if I'm willing to bid more or no, right? So the way to keep silent in that way is not to sort of show your hand, but also not to be egg-faced at the end of the day, that you went in public and say, oh, well, I lost the battle. Because let's not forget that the fierce rivalry between the different Emirates and the GCC, I mean, they're not best of friends, Qataris and Saudis and Dubai or Emiratis. Like, so for me, the first refusal is all about to come in at the end game, right? Where it comes to the second or third bidding stage. And I don't see this being concluded within this Q1 whatsoever. I see this being dragging out to April, at least end of April.
Yeah, it could be dragged out that far, and it's something Rain Group don't really want, is dragging it out that far. They were hoping to get a load of bidders in. The money goes high enough that the Glazers would eventually accept one of the bidders, and they haven't got that. They haven't got the powerhouses. They're expecting 4 or 5 genuine bidders that can go up to the 5.5, 6 billion mark, and they haven't got that. And I think that's a problem for them. So they've had to reassess the whole process. Hence why they started bringing on a lot more minority kind of bidders, even though they can't hit the required valuation to do a minority investment. But what they can do is join with other bidders to increase their bidding capacity.
Yeah.
So that was a change of tactics, I believe, that they've done in. Hence why I think we had the stuff yesterday was you had the 2 main bidders basically not put their bids in, or one of them at least pulling their bid out and reevaluating their bid. So I think that was them sending a message going, stop with the mind games. Let's just get this process going and get it done.
But this also, like, all 6 siblings need to agree at the end of the day. And there's been numerous reports that they cannot agree, right? There's 2 of them wants to keep and 4 of them wants to sell. And at the end of the day, what they will never get this kind of offer, even if they stay on board and take their, dividends out. If you get 6 billion on the table, you're walking away with 6 times what you ever spent, right? Because let's not forget, like, when the father bought the club on leveraged buyout, he took a loan to buy the club, and ever since then they've just been bankrolling and taking credits, buying all the players and everything. They haven't done nothing, basically. So this is a fair investment for 17 years that you're walking away with 6 billion, right? And I always say the money talks and BS walks, right? So, you know, if somebody puts 6 billion on the table, I'm sure they're going to sell up, like, you know, and anything else that it's kind of a scare tactics that, you know, they're looking to stay on. You know, we know what the Glazers are, and money talks at the end of the day. And the fact that the Super League is kind of done and dusted, it's over almost, but the English Premier League is the Super League, right? They were looking to sell, like, you know, pay-per-views, but nobody wants to buy pay-per-views because everyone catches stream on IPTV and stuff like that as well, right? So it's just going to be interesting, but, you know, at the end of the day, what I'm saying, it's not a transfer window, like, and it's not going to happen, like, just because they're creating the sensation that, you know, Wednesday's the final, you know, deadline day. No. I think that you will find out more, like, you know, come after the weekend as well, what's going on, right? You know, but I think the majority of the shareholder, like, you know, the ones that holds the biggest share is actually Darcy Lacey, isn't it? And she's been quite adamant to sell. But then I'm wondering, because she also took out, like, you know, based on her shares during the COVID pandemic, she took out a loan based on her share value. So how does that work? I'm not really versed with that. Michael, are you there?
She converted her shares. She converted her shares to A shares and took the loan off against the A share value in the open market.
Guys, if anyone wants to speak and have a say, like, you know, this is an open forum, like, this is for a global fan base to sort of put our minds together and just, you know, share your feelings and thoughts. Please just request and, you know, have your say. You know, at the end of the day, like, you know, for me, it doesn't really matter. Like, you know, for me, it's always been green and gold until we sold. You know, that's what matters, right? But at the end of the day, as a global fan base, we need to scrutinize once the final bidders has been revealed. Like, you know, who is the bad, good, and the ugly, right? And one thing that we don't want is the debt, right?
I will say this, people have been asking, why do people keep bringing up Dubai, and there's been no media reports about it and stuff like that. Nobody would have known about Sir Jim going in if he didn't go public. Nobody would have known Sheikh Hassim's bid if he didn't go public. Nobody knew that there was a 9-2 foundation being created. Nobody knows the identity of the third bidder. Nobody knows if there's a third bidder. Nobody knows the identity of the other minority groups. Only Elliot, because yet again they came out public. The media know nothing about this at all.
Yeah, but we all knew that, you know, in the beginning we all knew two names, right? Ever since the late fall, there was Sir Jim and there was Dubai, right? Then Dubai just went quiet. Okay, ever since they started, like, you know, it was just like a month and a half ago, approximately, or can it be 2 months or a month and a half ago, where Qatar came into the picture as late in, right? This is a little bit dubious as well, because, you know, I can only go back by facts and timelines, what's been reported and what I know from the region as well, right? And one can just put, you know, your logic and reasoning behind it. So why has it been set from 6 billion, right? Why hasn't been that asking price, but where everyone knows that the valuation is below 3 billion, to be honest, right? So there has to be some form of, you know, the first bidder that's put in a bid, like a verbal bid, which sets the benchmark. And the Rainy Group's job is to sort of do the marketing, do the PR, to attract the bidders and, you know, to make it competitive, because at the end of the day, it's the highest bid that will win. Any reflection on that?
Yeah. No, you're about right. Yeah, it's going to be the highest bidder. The 6 billion figure actually didn't come out into about January time. They were talking in dollars. They won it over $5 billion. Then it went to 7. There's the figure is always, the goalpost of the figure is always changed. It's never been divined out of what they actually want. And to be honest, a lot of time the figure actually came from people going, there's 6 siblings and they each want $1 billion each. I got other information beforehand that the 6 billion figure is what the family have actually agreed on. If somebody comes in with a £6 billion figure, they will consider that a value price that they will definitely 100% sell at. So it's not so much that it's the price that they want. It's more that's a price they would definitely consider selling at. Somebody can bid under it, and then I don't care what a lot of people say. If my brother's stopping me from getting an £800 million check, I will fight him on it, and I argue with him. Because what people need to understand is the rest of the family, they don't have a lot of money. They have a lot of assets. And if you've got a massive asset where you're getting paid almost $1.5 billion to $2 billion over the value of that company, and your brothers are like saying, "Oh no, I want to keep this." No.
No, so you're
They'll give into the pressure. They'll give into a pressure, a family pressure. That's too much money for the other Glazers. As everybody said, the other Glazers aren't interested in Manchester United. It's just Joel and Avram. They're the only two interested. So you put enough money onto the table, they'll eventually crack, because all the other brothers and sisters says, we're not giving you any funding. We're going to start reining in your control of the club as well. Because do remember, these guys only have 33% of the voting rights. So if they are refusing to sell, the other family members can basically vote them off the board as executive chairmen and make them have no ability to actually control the club. And Darcy herself could get the power and go in and start running the club and not give Joel and Avram a say in what appointment she makes. So that could happen as well, and nobody seems to be talking about that. They are co-chairmen of the board, but that's because the other brothers and sisters have voted for them. But if they start refusing big piles of cash, they can say, well, you want to keep United and run it, we're just going to vote you off the board, so you have no say. You have your say, but I'll outvote you in everything you do. And nobody seems to have mentioned that one.
But that kind of, that kind of debunks the whole fear of the Glazers staying on, because based on what you said there as well, the 33% is minority, where the rest of the siblings wants to sell, right? So
yep,
that is kind of the reason why I kind of tuned into I actually invited him to come to the space, but it didn't come yet. That was kind of the reason why I was curious to listen to Kieran speak about it. And usually Kieran is very positive, right? But there's a lot of fear at the moment, because the last thing that we want to do right now is to actually have the Glazers. And another thing is, why are we so fixated about the sum? Because the only one that will sort of be the winners in this case, unfortunately, is the Glazers, right? It's the Glazers that will walk away with 6 billion, right? But at the long run, what we will do as a fan base, we will benefit in the long run. Whoever comes in, we all say is the manifesto, right? It's just to clear the debt out, because Manchester United is big enough to be sustainable on its own operational costs, right? But there's so much things to be catched up on, because when they took over the club on the leverage buyout, the stadium itself was a modern stadium, but 17 years has passed, or 18 almost, and all they've done is like a little bit paper of the cracks, a little bit of liquid paints, right? So there's a lot of money that needs to be cash injection to go in there. So, okay, one thing is to buy the club, but then you have to also look at the overall investment, what you need to do on the infrastructure. So automatically that, you're looking at, and this is what I think that's been going on right now, what they went to Carrington and stuff to look at the overall operational sides of it and operational costs, right? Okay, if we put in a 6 billion, right, how much more do we have to put in to fix the rest? We're looking at an estimation of 10 billion all of a sudden. Right, to build a stadium will cost you, right, how much? Or even refurbish, rebuild like, Old Trafford. How much would that cost?
Well, operational costs of even building a new stadium or redeveloping Old Trafford, like just for redeveloping Old Trafford, for argument's sake, is around £1 billion. But then also you have to then take into include on that when you're rebuilding and refurbishing Old Trafford, you're not going to be at full capacity. So every week you're losing extra money that you would get. So that figure will go up. You think if you think, for instance, you're redeveloping Old Trafford over a period of 5 to 6 years, that could cost you hundreds of millions of pounds in lost match day revenue as well. So there's loads of different things that you can go into that. But when you're talking about the two different bids between Sir Jim the Glazers staying and the Qatari bid is the Glazers can't raise capital to build the stadium unless they sell naming rights or stuff like that. Sir Jim would have to take time to build the stadium, and I'm going to say the horrible D word, he will have to use debt to build the stadium. That's not a bad thing. Arsenal did it, Tottenham did it, Real Madrid are doing it. They take a big loan out and they pay it off every year to build the stadium. It's how you get money. The reason why the Qataris are seeming a lot more agreeable with a lot of people is because they're able to go in with the money and build it all instantly. And so there's your three different sets of funding. You have Sir Jim that would have to take out debt, the Glazers that can't actually manage that, and the Qataris that can just write the checks for it. So that's where there's a lot of divide coming amongst people. And I've just kind of lost my train of thought there, sorry, because I'm getting sent messages at the moment. So, like, with the Glazers staying, the problem is a lot of people, like, when they take into account that the Glazers getting minority investment as well, is yes, they could get minority investment. Yes, they can bring in new revenue streams, but as nobody seems to message, they're basing that off the status quo still being followed, where you still have fans going to the stadium, you still have shirts being bought in high numbers, merchandising, and sponsors willing to sponsor the club. But the problem is nobody's taken into account if the Glazers pull out at this point and decide to go without a sale and go minority investment. I do believe you'll see a spark in the fan base. It's quite similar to the Super League spark, because nobody would have told you that in the middle of a pandemic, you're going to have thousands upon thousands of United's fans outside Old Trafford disrupting a Manchester United versus Liverpool game over the Super League. Now imagine that you've given them same fans the hope that they're getting rid of the parasites. They have two confident bidders on the table that have publicly said they have the funds to pay over the odds for United, but the Glazers say, no, we want more money. It's going to be pandemonium. And sponsors are going to suffer online and on the pitch. Games will be cancelled. They'll find some way to, I don't know, not protest and invade the pitch, but you could easily do what Stop Oil did. Just get the loads of fans to block every single road going into Old Trafford and say, try and get your team buses in. The police can't move them because they're not an organisation. They're sovereign citizens and they can protest how they please. It is still counted as a peaceful protest. It took the government 3 months to get court orders against Stop Oil to remove them from roads. How long is it going to take Manchester United to try and get that effective? That you do that for a couple of months, the Glazers are screwed because games are going to be called off.
Yeah, that's what
So
everyone is saying.
I don't think
against the wall already. There's no returning back, right? Because it's got so much media coverage. The entire global fan base is ecstatic, excited. I don't see that there is no return back. Like, and if you look at the sponsorship values dropping, right? They lost Team Viewer as a sponsor, so they're looking to replace that one. So you've seen the sheer invention the fans has been doing, like attacking sponsorship. This is just going to be worse, according to my opinion, then.
Oh yeah, it'll be pandemonium, and every fan, match-going fans especially, they could do so much to them. And as I said, the Super League, it took a spark with the Super League to kind of unite the fan base, to pull them all together. And I think the Glazers pulling away at this point will cause so much anger, distaste. You'll have, like, especially the protesting groups that have done so well in the future, they'll eventually then get the backing that they've been hoping with. The backing that they got for the Super League is the exact backing they've wanted for the Glazers. And I think if the Glazers pulled away at this point, they'll get it. And I don't see how investment groups have overlooked this, or their financial analysts not telling them this as a matter of fact. But, the value of the club will plummet if the fans revolt on a good level. And when you start affecting match day games, that's when you start to affect the bottom line of money making. Because if you get matches called off, you affect revenue from that day, you affect TV money coming in, there's fines put on that. What happens then if the Premier League goes, you keep having to get matches cancelled because of your protests? So I tell you what, we're not allowing fans to come in for Manchester United home games, and stuff like that happens. So I don't see how they can stay. I really don't. Financially, they maybe could, but I don't see how they ride the PR wave.
Yeah, you're right. I see Chase is requested as a speaker. Good evening, Chase. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're calling from. How you doing, mate?
Good afternoon, Mick. How are you?
Not bad, USA.
Uh, I just wanted to speak on when you were talking about the stadium and if it can be refurbished. And personally, I would think no, because of how many years it's been neglected. And it's not about the surface; it's about what is everything on the bottom. And when you're looking at everything underneath, there are things that most likely cannot be repairable, and if they are, will cost millions of dollars to replace, to get everything right. So if you're talking a brand new stadium close to 2 to 3 billion, you're looking at even a little bit more to even try and refurbish Old Trafford. So then,
Mm.
way it's a lot more feasible and plausible to build a brand new stadium that's going to last you 10 to 15 plus years over something that's going to cost you just more to try and refurbish Old Trafford.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I get your point, and I kind of agree you. But then you have the sentimental value and the culture of Old Trafford, right? The stress bowling and all that stuff, right? There's a lot of memories in there, right?
Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of memories and sentimental things which can be taken to the new stadium, from the clock and stuff like that. I mean, I get you won't get the memories feel of walking into a brand new stadium. You don't get that
Mm.
Busby type of feel when you walk into Old Trafford anymore, or the new Old Trafford, or whatever they would end up calling the new stadium. But it just comes a time when if it's not been kept up, there's nothing you can really do about it in the money scheme of things, because if you're looking at it at a money wise type of thing, you know eventually at that point, from everything that's going on underneath, the surface could just break down, and then you're looking at
Mm.
serious trouble to where it could never ever be stepped in again.
But you can also look at a new start, new page, new dawn, new stadium, right?
Yeah, like just a new beginnings to forward.
But there comes again, like there comes again that okay, if it's 6 billion, the asking price, there's that money you have to put into sort of cover the Glazers, cover the debts, and buy the outright of Manchester United, and then you probably have to dismantle the PLC, because you're probably not going to have it on New York Stock Exchange. This was orchestrated in 2015.
Yeah, so probably the
Not,
whole concept, you're looking at 10 plus
so
10
if
plus
it's
billion.
yeah, so if it's a foundation 92 foundation in Qatar, they're pretty much a tax-free organization as well. So either way we flip it around and turn it around. Like whoever bids for the Manchester United, let's say if it's Qatar, the modern game have changed, right? I'm saying like the mediocre millionaire or billionaire is no longer enough, right? So Jim said it himself in an interview, like the correlation between successful clubs and sports is money, right? And he said that, like City
Yeah,
has
I,
it.
mean, I
PSG
remember
has
Phil
it.
Brown saying the same type of thing. This football used to be a millionaires type of game. Then it was a multi-millionaire, and then it went to billionaires, and now we're talking about multi-billionaires, close to trillionaires, where it's just free money and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm.
And that's
So let's look at
Just to let you know, that the Rain Group has told your Finnish entrepreneur Thomas that they are not allowing him to enter the process at this time and have rejected his bid. So what that would suggest to me is they don't plan this to go on for months and months and months and go by the summer, or they would let him in and let him try and build his bid up.
no. That was, ironically enough, it wasn't even mentioned in the first bidding run. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's a late bid.
it's a late bid, yeah, but it's just to show also to the global fan base, like to have a bid that offers like fan ownership, like what you see in Spain and Germany and stuff like that, right? But if you look at it realistically, how long would it take him for him to gather like, you know, $3 from 1 billion users in that case? Like if he cash up like, you know, 3 billion himself and half goes to the fan base, like, you know, that will take like, you know, years, right? So
Yeah, I feel like
yeah,
that's a hard one.
yeah. So looking under the hood, ladies and gents, like, you know, moving forward, I mean, from a fan base perspective, how do you see this play out? Like, you know, if you look at the good, bad, and the ugly, like, you know, doesn't matter who is actually the winning bid. Doesn't matter how much the money is for, or what is more important, that we actually, you know, get back to the winning ways that, you know,
I
the owner.
I feel, for me, and I think it's, you know, it's elation, it's monumental, and then also it factors in the three-stage emotional. You know, that we're fine after 17 plus years. I mean, I'm in my 30s and I've supported this club for 20 plus years, and it's emotional, and we all love this club and we want the best for this club. We want our club back, and after 17 years, we finally have this opportunity to get back to who we are.
Mm. And this I say, like, you know, the fight is not over. Like, and it's always been green and gold until we sold. Like, you know, there's no time to sort of ease the gas pedal. And I get it, like, you know, you get excited, like, you know, gas me up, oil me up and stuff like that. But all I'm saying is, like, keep your powder dry, because there's nothing we can do more than, you know, keep the pressure on right now, because it's not a private, it's not a public sale. We are not the ones that choosing the winning bid at the end of the day. We know it's the Rainy Group that's handling the transaction, and all we can say is we are in the final stages, right? We know that they have to sell up very, very soon, right? They are desperate for cash, and we as a club need to move on to the transfer market in summer as well. So there's a little bit of a deadline. We cannot lie about that.
Yeah, I think also that's what Kieran Maguire. I know some people didn't like his view and what he was saying, but he was having his opinion, and his opinion was based on the Glazers changing their operating. I can't remember the word that people use in Latin to operate their operating methods, and actually investing into the club, because that's the only way they'll be able to keep the club going. It needs a cash injection, which is obvious. So either running that up through capital or something, but they need to pump money in, and this is what they've never done. So I don't see them doing that. I could see maybe Joel and Avram wanting to do that, but I can't see the other brothers and sisters diluting their shares and pumping that money into Manchester United. The second their shares get sold, even to a minority investor, them four other brothers and sisters are going to take that money and walk out the door. They're going to be, we're not giving it to United. That's our money. That's our inheritance. So
Yeah, they're being
I
very.
think we can kind of push that scenario out the window to a certain extent. But there's always that fear that somebody crazy will come in and let Joel and Avram buy out the other four brothers and sisters, load a lot more debt onto the company, and allow them to continue to run Manchester United. It is a fear. I know people don't like to hear this, but it isn't a possibility in a sense that that could happen in that way.
Yeah, but if this, you know, if we put another logic hat on, right? Let's be realistic, right? To say, you know, if you go back in timeline, I know they were seeking like, you know, 1 billion from Apollo Group. They denied them, and that was just discussing to buy out the other siblings, right? Looking under the hood, like, you know, under mismanagement ever since they took over, they inherited from Malcolm, right? You know, who out of the investors will give them that money, barring that they've been mismanaging this club for at least 10 years in the making, right? Since they took over from the father, right? Who will give them that kind of cash? Because if you give them that kind of cash, you would expect some return on investment as an investor, right? And I keep hearing also that the shareholders wants the Glazers out as well. The ones that are owned, they own the shares that they are not the Glazer owned shares. Hang on, I got a request for speak. Let me see.
Yeah, you're talking about the main backers of the Class A shares.
Hmm. I'm just going to add as to approve as I speak. So I'm learning as we go. This is the first ever technology space I'm doing, right? Guys, if you know, let's have a Q&A. Like, you know, guys, let us know what your feelings are. Like, you know, the way we're moving forward, the way I see it, there's no way the glaze is going to stay, right? I think it's just the scaremonger tactics. Everything points towards a full 100% takeover, as what we said. If you give them 6 billion on the table, they would definitely walk away with that money. But you also got to look at what is Glaze going to do afterwards. It's contingency. They're building up all the relationship with oil and gas companies down in Qatar and Dubai and Saudi Arabia. So there's kind of the way I see it, why they were sort of kind of also mingling around, building that relationships down in Qatar 2022 World Cup, right? Guys, anyone that wants to have a say, like, you know, welcome to send a request. James, speak.
Yo, Mick.
As was first.
Okay,
As
Az go
of-
first. I let Az go first.
James, that's the first time you let me go first in anything, but thanks anyway. But yeah, Paul and Ruby, a quick question. So there's 6 siblings. The way their bylaws and everything is set up, is there a scenario where if they get an offer on the table and it's under the 6 billion that they wanted, does majority rule or do all 6 have to agree?
Anything to do with the B shares being either diluted or sold has to be totally 100% agreed with all the siblings. So it's not a vote share situation. It's 6 hands have to go up. So even if one Glazer wants to dilute his B shares to A shares and sell them, all Glazers have to agree to that. Same with any of the selling or anything like that. So it's a way that the company was set up so neither one of them could backstab each other. That's why Joel and Avram have tried to basically get funding to buy the other 4 out, because the other 4 would agree to get money and leave, basically.
But according to everything that you've said in the past, Paul, like if there's 69%, the amount of funding needed for them in order to do that and what they would have to give up would make them lose majority control, right?
They still have control of the club's day-to-day runnings, but they run the risk of losing majority control of the actual company itself, because, as I say, there is stipulations in their in their bond agreements and their debt agreements. One of them is, so if they give away more than 18% of their remaining stake for investment, if they give away more of that 18 mistake, nothing stops somebody coming along trying to buy all of the 31% shares of Class A, then approaching whoever invested into United and going, we want to buy your stake. And as soon as somebody takes that 51% of the ownership of the company, automatically debts are called in, because technically the Glazers do not, yes, they have the voting control, but technically they do not control the company anymore in the sense of stock market. And then if you're the owner of 51% of the company, there's other legal ramifications you can go through, because you can class yourself as the majority shareholder in the company and your owners are not respecting shareholders, and then there's a load of legal things that you can go into on that.
Yeah, because Paul, I know the threshold here is 70% here in England, but is it different in the US? Is it the same? Do you know?
It's a different situation with that there, because technically they won't control the B shares, the actual controlling vote shares of the company, but there is other legal routes that you can go down. But at the end of the day, if somebody hit that 51% threshold, the Glazers would be kind of in a massive amount of financial trouble because of the conditions of chain of ownership due to the debts that they would, if somebody owns 51% of the company and they haven't sold all their B shares, they'll be liable to pay that debt back.
Last question. Do you know what the exact amount of that debt or the penalties are if they do get called?
Oh, in that situation with the 51%, it's 100% of the debt that gets called in. The bond situation is completely different, and I don't know the figure with the bonds because I don't know how many bonds they've sold and what percentage they've sold the bonds at, and what agreements they have in place with the bonds, because the bond document that they put up doesn't give, it just gives percentage figures, but then percentage figures could be depending on what percentage of the bonds of the debt they've given out and what percentage they're guaranteeing of interest payments and everything. It's a little bit out of my league for that.
Thanks, Paul.
James.
How are you, Mick? How are you getting on?
Oh, fantastic.
And Paul?
Chilling.
Yeah. How is Thailand these days, Mick, anyway? Before I get to my question.
2 more weeks left and back to the civilization, to the cold.
You'll be grand.
Love them. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, just to be honest, reading about like what potential can happen for them, for like the Qatari bid is probably the better bid that for them as a whole, because it offers them more outside after selling the club. Like, it opens up a lot more doors into their. I think could be potentially given more access into Qatar to different companies and like continue business and stuff like that. So that's why I just think really like Jim Ratcliffe can't offer him much in that sense.
But James, also apparently that he came out like after he had a meeting at Carrington. There was also an article coming out from Financial Times and Washington Post that he's been bidding for the fracking in US, and so basically we had, Ineos had no exposure in the US market, and they utilized the PR to get exposure to win that bid for the fracking in US.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday came out something, there was some form of explosion in Texas or something. So I don't know, because at the end of the day, like, what I'm trying to say is that this is a massive opportunity to let people know that you're bidding for Manchester United, because you get a global exposure. There's not a lot of people knew about who Jim Ratcliffe was before, right? Now everyone talks about Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the financial world, right? I certainly have never heard about Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe before, right?
Yeah, I personally. Well, they're very involved in the F1 with Mercedes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I didn't know anything about the F1, I'd know nothing about Ineos or Sir Jim.
Yeah, speaking about F1, it sounds like it's more like, media is lining up like, similar, like it's a pole position, and at the end of the day, the ones that gone public, this is the ones they've been focusing on, right, and writing about. But we don't know who else is in the background. It's at least 2 more, bidders, or more than 5, or even they're coming out to say there's 8 bidders, right?
To be honest, I think there's probably 3 main bidders, and then maybe 2 that haven't met the mark of even 4.5 to 5 billion, and then the rest are minority investors. That'd make more logical sense when you actually look at it. And I just want
in a tender process, sorry, can I just add on something to what you said there? Because it is quite normal practice that, you have minority investors that are willing to invest in the winning bid at the end of the day. You saw that happening with Todd Bowley's consortium as well.
Yeah. And the other thing you were mentioning about Dubai and their bid back in mid-December, it was actually, what was it, the 14th or 17th of November? There was I'm not saying it was their bid, but there was a bid put down for $4.8 million, or $4.8 billion, and there's nothing on it at all. As in, no one has talked about it. Nothing.
That's why I find it very, very strange.
Yeah, so
because they don't talk about it, because it has nothing. It hasn't come out anything from. They haven't really announced any PR, any media. It's just been silent. Right? But if you are sort of put in a verbal bid as first refusal, right, there's no need for you to go out public, right?
Yeah.
You just sit back, make your popcorn, watch it all play out, and you come in at the final end to say, "Yep, I'm now entering into the bidding race."
Yeah.
So share speculations at this stage, but it's very plausible, right? It's very, very plausible, because media is now starting to pick up that, yeah, maybe there is a third bidder. Who is that third bidder, right? But as you said, you can only go back to the timelines in the beginning, where Glazers was spotted numerous times going over to Dubai, doing photo ops and stuff like that, masking it to say it's the cricket stuff as well. So the reason we also see, like, the Qatari going aggressively, because they kind of suspect that Dubai is in that race as well, right? So they kind of want to smoke it out, like, to say, okay, show me your hand, show me your hand. Who else is in there, right?
And the two of them kind of don't like each other either.
No, they don't.
as a nation.
It is.
Like for business wise,
Mm,
they want to match each other and do better than each other the whole time. So
right. Where did Dolly go? Dolly, you raised your hand.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Hello, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, mate. Yeah. How's life?
Cool. Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. Been better, but been worse. Question. Well, a couple of things really. One is the whole situation with the Glazers feels like a really crap episode of Succession, because you listen to what they're doing about the club and they all just seem pretty bloody clueless, but all I get the sense of is they want their money, which is exactly why they're crap owners for the club. But I mean, my question was more around the impact of what's happening with the Fed and what's going on with interest rates at the moment, because if they've had access to the books and been able to see the financial situation of the club, they'll also would have been able to understand the impact of any changes to the Fed interest rates on their debts and their loans. So the question is, A, does that impact it? But B, if so, would that amend their bid? Because they might say, do you know what, with X happening, we aren't willing to pay whatever you think it's worth. So it's me being a bit financially oblivious to how these things work, but just
That's a
wondering
very,
if that had an
very
impact.
good question. This actually something that I've been thinking about as well, because Fed is like, we've seen a global recession taking place. We are heading towards worse than 2008 in terms of it is more of a credit crisis, right? But we're talking about banks that cannot fail, right? And there's, I think it's about 40 banks that are on that list, and Bank of America is one of them, right? And Credit Suisse is one of them. But you saw them getting bailout. But it certainly raises some alarm bells in terms of investors. Like, is it risk to go in on that money? What's going to happen in the future? But if you go on timelines, like, every financial recession has a reset button as well. So we are heading towards definitely like, the biggest crisis that we've seen. So the question is it worth going in on that, especially now when the financial market is what it is? So that might also have an effect that a lot of people are pulling out, right? But that's probably also one of the reasons why they're still driving this, bidding war to say like, let's go for it anyway. Like, 5.6 billion pounds, 6 billion pounds, right?
Well, I mean, it's common sense to try and get the most for it. I mean, anyone would do that. So I think what they're doing is just logical. But I'm thinking from a bidder's perspective, less than the Glazers. The Glazers just want money. That's all they care about. We know that. But if you're coming from a bidder's perspective, and we know that the Qataris are shrewd, we know Ineos aren't just going to pay for it, and anyone going who's got this amount of money isn't going to be daft when it comes to investments. But I do wonder if, having assessed what the club's current position is, yes, they would have understood the pros, but I think they would have had a better understanding of the cons and perhaps the position that the Glazers are in, and therefore the game playing and the financial play that they're doing in terms of bidding and so on might be upping the ante on the Glazers to kind of say, well, we know where you are now, so you either sell or we're running. And I do think if they run, or if the Glazers don't sell, one, I worry for what happens to the club. Two, I would worry that I wonder what people might do if they did go back into the market to try and find a buyer, because they would have lost so much in terms of trust with the potential market. I also don't think people would be willing to bid as much as they were if they don't sell at this time, because they go, do you know what, you've played this game before, we're not going to take a risk. So I do think there's a lot of risk on the Glazers' hand, and therefore it's a little bit where these bidders now have a bit more power in their position and they're just flexing their muscles, and good on them. I think they should.
There's 2 points that we can discuss about when we talk about financial, and the time is right to sell, because they know that the financial recession is real, right? If you all of a sudden get a substantial bid on 6 billion, you walk away 100%, because knowing from now and 18 months is unprecedented times what's going to happen, right? You can only look at what happened in 2008 and how long it took for the financial market to recover. And we see the Fed, like, bailing out banks, like, printing more and more money, right? So for every dollar they print becomes a debt at the end of the day. But one thing that you also need to take in consideration is the consumer spending, right? Because, when you have a recession, people, like ordinary people, gets hit hard first, right? You got to look at what's more important for me, to put food on the table or pay tickets to go to see a match or buy a jersey, right? Because everything is going up. Like, we've seen inflation rates going up 40-50%, like on food stuff and stuff. So definitely, I mean, that raises a valid point. Like, you know, as you as an investor come in, not only to look at the overall valuation of the club, but you're looking at contingency and commercial in terms of revenue generation. If you're a private investor, to say, you know, will the revenue drops, like in terms of TV rights? Will people spend less on? Will they cancel the Sky subscription? Will they do that? Because at the end of the day, as a family man, you kind of need to first look at putting the food on the table as a first priority.
I mean, to me, I've been lucky to work at a few football clubs. And in terms of the commercials of what match day and what the actual day looks like compared to TV rights and off the field earnings, it doesn't compare. The even sponsorship is starting to stagnate a little bit because it's got a shelf, it's got a kind of a ceiling that people are reaching. TV was basically where the money is. Interesting that you see Apple now looking at bidding against Amazon to get some of the rights for television, but ultimately I think what we'll find in the next 10 years, the Super League will happen, and I think United will want to be part of it, but it's going to turn into what I think someone earlier said, it's the billionaires and the multi-billionaires. It's going to turn into that kind of world. So if you're buying a club, I think you're looking at this from a longer term perspective for maybe 10, 15 years, and I do think that will happen eventually, and then it will be a worthwhile investment. The problem for the Glazers is, one, the PR stunt that they did for the Super League was a disaster. But also they're hated so much, people want them out. So, you know, a smart investor, I think, if it is Sheikh Jassim or whoever, I think they will put money on the Super League happening, and that's where they'll make their money.
But could you look at from a, if you take your analogy, what you just said now, or your factual, and you compare it to another sport like Formula One, it is kind of also become like, you know, whoever has the biggest money, like Mercedes and stuff like that, like, you know, whoever, you know, puts in money to, it's kind of a billionaires racing club as well, right? You know, it's all about having the better engine, the competitive advantage, and, you know, I'm just putting out there, like, you know, so yeah, there is a very good valid point what you're saying there, right? Because, but at the end of the day, that bubble has to burst as well, like, you know, because the trajectory of the modern football is going is all about billions. It's all about billionaires club. And I see the trend happening. And that's what I said, like, you know, to be owned by a sort of mediocre millionaire, like, you know, then you probably be in a premiership or at the bottom of the league, stuck that you cannot sort of advance further. So part of that also has to then become a part of regulation in terms of Premier League to sort of give it a fair play, like, you know, to everyone to be competitive. And that's what they're doing with the TV rights, right?
Completely. And I also think, by the way, I'm going to shut up and let someone else speak, but I do think that for all we hear about, oh, you know, Sheikh Jassim or Ineos, or whoever it is that buys the club and their kind of background, whether it's sports washing or kind of even Ineos have been accused of certain things, I just find this all a bit daft that is pointed at the club. I think the people who really need to start taking some responsibility is the Premier League. And also we need to understand that UEFA and FIFA are equally as corrupt. So, you know, the fans and the club and everyone are completely innocent in these situations. They just want what's best for the club. And until those lots sort out what actually happens within regulation, things like the Super League will happen. So I don't mind who owns the club as long as they have the best interests of the club at heart and they invest in it and make it as best it can be. And that's all I care about. So I don't care who they are.
No, that hits the point, and that is kind of the agenda of the overall space, is because, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, I always felt the obligation to protect the club and protect the fan base, because, like, you know, we with Erik ten Hag's appointment, like, you know, we started to believe again. We're going places. We're seeing the wind of changes, right? But we fans are getting hit very hard by this media spin and this, you know, and I just felt like, oh, this is too much, right? And at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do because we are not the one choosing the owner, right? So for me, like, you know, what matters is that the club is getting sold, right? And doesn't matter who it is, if it's Sheikh Tahani, Qatar, Dubai, or Sir Jim, as long as they have the right sporting project, sporting vision, and they actually, like, you know, make Manchester United great again the way it used to be, right? Because we all know the Glazers for 17 years didn't really care. They didn't even list the as a club. They said it's a business, right? They treated it as a business as well, right? But rest assured that they submitted a white paper that there will never be another Glazenomics model to be run again. If you remember, there was like a month ago they submitted a white paper in the Premier League to say there should be a new regulations in terms of how football clubs should be owned. And never to forget also the FFP, like, you know, because we need to clear the debt ASAP in order to actually be competitive. Because right now we cannot spend anything. We saw that in January, right? We have to go on loanees, like, you know, we got Sabitzer. We were lucky to get Sabitzer, and we got Weghorst as well. So there was all loan deals. So definitely, like, you know, the way I compile it end in day, like, you know, they have to sell, they have to get in cash as soon as possible, and I don't see them stay until the summer, right?
Yeah, definitely not. But Mick, I'm going to have to jump here because I need to go get food and all because I'm in at work at 4 o'clock in the morning.
That's all right. That's fine. And
thanks to everybody for coming, talking, giving opinions, and hopefully we'll get to the end of this situation before we all lose. Well, I say before we all lose our hair. I've already lost mine, but before everybody else pulls their hair out. But cheers very much, Mick, and I will catch you later.
thanks, Paul. If anyone wants to have a come in and have a say, just have a request before we kind of go back to the day. Yeah, I sort of echo what Paul is saying, because at the end of the day, like, you know, we just need to be calm and collective. As what we say, we don't control the bidding process, but I understand that we want this to happen so badly, so we're constantly checking every day, every minute for information, what's going to happen, right? So barring what we discussed here today, that, you know, we can kind of rule out that there will be a minority investment, right? I don't know if we can agree on that. And hopefully we will see some action taking place in the next couple of weeks, right? So who would it be? Doesn't matter. What matters at the end of the day, it's always been Glazers green and gold until it's sold. And hopefully we get an owner that really takes care of the club, you know, and clear the debt and just invest in the infrastructure that we need. This is all what we want as a fan base. We want to be competitive. And with Erik ten Hag, you know, been doing everything with his hands tied behind his back and achieving what we are today, is just remarkable, right? So if you look at it, like, you know, we won the Carabao Cup, amazing, right? We are in the Europa League quarterfinals. We are in the semi-finals of FA, and we're currently sitting third, and that's with limited resources because he wasn't back in January. So hopefully we get this sorted as soon as possible, so we can move on, have a new page, new start in January, and go invest in the players to back Erik ten Hag in terms of the players that he needs to compete. So it's always been my opinion that this season has always been about the rebuild, the change, the sell of the club. But where we are today is just remarkable, and this is all down to Erik ten Hag, you know. Guys, anyone wants to have a say? Otherwise, we will just let everyone go back to the days or the evenings, the dinners. Let me know. All right. Well, listen, in that case, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for having patience. This is kind of the first space that I ever managed to hold. We had a lot of people tuning in. And for me, it's all about the global fan base. As we are global, no matter where we are in the world, you know, I don't care about the 𝒖𝒊𝒄𝒌 match-going fans because Manchester United is global. I don't care about the xenophobic stuff that's been writing. We all know who. At the end of the day, it's just saltiness because they all know that, you know, Manchester United with a new owner is a sort of sleeping giant. You know, we're given the funds and the tools. We are there to be, not to be a joke. We are there to be competing again. So I'm just getting emotional, and I don't want to get emotional, but, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, this is what I'm looking forward to, like, you know, to see good football, to be entertained, and to see us winning trophies again, because it's been far too long, right? Guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much. This space is recorded. You can go back anytime to listen to it again. This is the purpose, like, you know, share with your friends, share with your opinions, because at the end of the day, we're a global fan base. We are millions of people. We share information. If you get information, share with everyone. But just stay calm and stay beautiful and be nice to each other in the socials. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for stopping by and watching MUFC Realist TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on the socials.